Hey everyone, I hope that you are doing well. This is the first video in the series that where I'm going to look at each of the classes in 4th edition from the initial player's handbook that was released and assess which of the races would be the best fits for that particular class. So it's not as straightforward as you might think, where you can just simply look at some kind of table and just drop some lines and say, yeah, this is the way it should go. We got to really look at each individual class and see how the different abilities are being used for that class to know which race would be the best as far as those bonuses go as they are published within the book. If you have not watched the introductory video for this series, you might want to go back and check that out, because I go through in detail what my approach is going to be and how I'm going to be looking at each of these classes and making these determinations for the rankings. So if you want to go check that video out and then come back here and pick this up, and you can watch this one. Otherwise, we'll just carry on. Before we get into it, if you do enjoy this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out down in the description some other ways that you can support the work, either by becoming a channel member or by becoming a member through Ko-fi, where you can get access to our Discord server. With that said, let's jump in and take a look at our first class in this conversation, which is a cleric. So we can see that a cleric has 3 key abilities referenced in here. We got wisdom, we've got strength, and we've got charisma. And so now the question is going to be, how are those abilities being used, and which ones are actually more important, so we can understand what do we really need to specialize in and really, get the best ability scores out there, where the bonuses that we get for the different races would come in handy and make the most sense. So let's take a look at our powers that we get for being a cleric and see what we're working with. And so if we kind of scroll through this list of powers, what you can see is, so the Channel Divinity Turn Undead uses our wisdom modifier. And then if we kind of scroll through, we've got at our at-will powers, we've got wisdom, we've got strength, we've got strength, we've got wisdom. And counter prayers, we've got wisdom, strength. So we're basically, for both of those, we've got 2 choices that rely on strength, 2 choices that rely on wisdom. For our dailies, strength, wisdom. This one does not actually require anything, so we've got 2 wisdoms and a strength. I'm not going to go through all of these, obviously, but as you'll see that same trend, where basically there's a mix of powers that some would use strength as the key ability and other ones that would use wisdom. It really comes down to whether or not you're going to be a character that is more melee combat and really getting up right there against the enemies and attacking, or whether you're going to be using a holy symbol, which is your implement, and attacking from a distance. So depending on which type of character you're trying to build will really determine which of those powers would fit you the best. If you're wanting to be a character that's right up there in the fray, then you might be less likely to have to be attacking at range, because you're going to be wanting to be right up there in the middle of everything. Or the other way around. You don't want to get up into the fray. You want to stay on the sidelines and just use your holy symbol and cast these prayers from afar. Then you might lean towards the wisdom one, and you don't need strength. So you basically have this choice to make, where either one of those abilities would be good. You don't need to, even though they're both listed, wisdom and strength, they're both listed as key abilities, it's kind of an either or choice. You can either choose to be someone who mostly uses wisdom, or one that mostly uses strength. If you tried to balance the 2, you could, and that would give you more options as far as the powers that you could choose from. But then you're sacrificing a little bit, because if you go all in on wisdom, you can get like a +4 bonus. Whereas if you try to even it down, you might only get a +2 bonus, and so you're kind of a little more average in it. So that's really up to you in the type of character that you're trying to play. Now, there's also this 3rd ability, which is charisma. And if you look, what you'll see is that the charisma one, it's not listed as one of the attack abilities that you would need, but it's listed as the additional things that happen. So like for the turn undead, then you do your attack with wisdom, and the damage actually is with wisdom, but then you can push the target a number of squares equal to 3 plus your charisma modifier. So the charisma is used for those additional things that happen for some of these powers, but it's not even all of powers. So if you go through here, you'll see that there's not anything charisma there. There's not anything with charisma there. There is not anything with charisma there, but Sacred Flame does have a charisma, so you gain temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier plus half your level. or to make a saving. Well, that's an initial thing. So again, that's what you'll see with charisma, is that it's giving some additional ability to the results of these powers. It's not the main ability, so that's why it's listed third in the list of key abilities for it. So it's less important that you provide a ton of bonus for that. Obviously, if you were to maximize your charisma, then you'd get you'd grant a lot of temporary hit points. You'd be able to push a character a lot farther with that. But it's not on every single power. So, you got Turn Undead, you've got Sacred Flame, you've got Cause Fear. But, looking at just the powers that are on this page, that's only 3 of these powers that you could choose from that have even something that uses charisma. And you'll see that continued on here, that it is something that is good to have for some of those powers, but it's not critical because it doesn't need it for all of the powers. So what you really want to do is focus on whether you're building your character based on wisdom, where you would use your holy symbol as an implement and make these ranged attacks from afar, or whether you're going to have a melee weapon and you're going to get right up there in the face of the enemies and actually slash them directly. And then the charisma would be a secondary thing that you would want to give you a little bit of extra thing. I do want to point out one other thing about that charisma bonus, is that if you look, so here we have the Turn Undead. It's a wisdom attack, all right, and then it gives you a little something extra with your charisma bonus. Sacred Flame, also a wisdom attack, and you get a little extra something with your charisma bonus. Cause Fear is a wisdom attack, and you get something extra with your charisma bonus. And if you can see the trend here as you go through, and we'll just take a look at some of these other ones. I don't think you get anything with your charisma there, nothing there. And now I'm even struggling to find another one that has charisma. So it shows you how it's a little bit different. This one is just a healing one that also does use some charisma in it as well. But from those initial ones, what you can see is that the powers that take advantage of the charisma are the powers that use wisdom as their primary ability. So if you choose the powers if you decide to make a cleric that's going to really be strong in strength, those powers that you're choosing that are strength based don't actually have those charisma based extra bonuses that they get. Those extra bonuses are generally more aligned with the wisdom powers. Now, I'm only talking about this book. I only looked at the first few levels, and, maybe some of the leader books that come along that shifts, but that's something to keep in mind when you're choosing your race and which bonus you're going to get. So with that said, let's take a look at some of the races that we have, and I'm gonna flip over to this other screen so that we can kind of break it down in this type of view. You can see that we've got our different races here and what the bonuses are that we're working with. So we are focused on our cleric right now, and so the options that we have are the 8 different classes. I said in the intro, I'm not going to worry about humans. So we got 7 choices. Let's start with the Dragonborn. This one seems to make sense. Look at that. It's got 2 of the abilities right off the bat. That, the key abilities for a cleric are wisdom, strength, and charisma. And wouldn't you know, a Dragonborn has strength and charisma. Strength is great. So if you're going to make that cleric that is going to be with a melee weapon and right up in the face of the enemies, Dragonborn would be a great choice because it's going to give you that +2 bonus to strength. Awesome. And then you got this +2 bonus to charisma also. But if you remember what we just said, those powers that are using the charisma to give you a little bit something extra, those powers are wisdom based. The strength based powers are not actually going to do anything special that requires a bonus to charisma. So you're losing out on a little bit of something there because it doesn't directly correspond. But Dragonborn is still a solid choice because you are going to get that bonus to your strength. So then we say, all right, well, what else do we have besides the Dragonborn? And the next tier down is really probably your dwarf and your elf, because those both give you a bonus to wisdom. So you'll get a +2 bonus to your wisdom in those, but similar to the Dragonborn in that, the Dragonborn gets you a charisma bonus, but you can't really use it because the powers you would be choosing are going to be strength based. Here with the dwarf and the elf, you're going to be able to get that +2 bonus for wisdom, which would really open up those wisdom based powers for you. That would use that charisma bonus, but you don't get a charisma bonus for your dwarf and your elf. So you're kind of, you're having to weigh your options there of what you want to do. It really comes down to, if you want that melee fighter cleric that's going to be right up there in the enemy, the Dragonborn's a really good choice for you. If you're going to be the more ranged cleric that's going to use the holy symbol from a distance, then your dwarf and your elf are your good choices for that one. And of course, the elf gives you the dexterity, which will help with your armor class and will also help with your initiative. The dwarf gives you the constitution, which will help with your healing surges and your maximum hit points. So that is something to consider as well. So those are kind of your main options that you're going to have. Then you get kind of into this middle section, and you're looking at the elf, the half elf, and the halfling. And sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. The half elf, the halfling, and the tiefling. I already talked about the elf. So these are interesting because they all give you the bonus to charisma. So you're going to get a +2 bonus to your charisma. Unfortunately, as we saw with the powers, the charisma being a key ability for the cleric, that only gives you something special on certain powers that are really wisdom based. And it's a relatively relatively small number of those powers that gives you that sort of boost for your charisma. So you kind of have to ask yourself, would you really go into, if you're trying to make an optimal character, I don't know that charisma would be the main thing that you're worried about. If you have a charisma that gives you a modifier of a +1 or just a +2, that's probably about the best you're going to get from it. If you really want to lean in where you're getting a +4 bonus to charisma, but in order to do that, you had to sacrifice your wisdom and you only got like a +2 to wisdom, then it's going to be harder for you to hit with those powers where you would actually see the benefits of this charisma bonus that you've got. So something to think about there. Definitely kind of a tier 2 type choice that you have. And then our last option is the Eladrin. Eladrin gives you a bonus to dexterity and intelligence, which neither one of those is one of the key abilities for a cleric. You certainly could build a nice balanced character and use your just straight stuff from the point buy or from the array to get you the bonuses in wisdom or strength or charisma from that, and then use these bonuses to really ramp up your dexterity intelligence and have a nice across the board even character as an Eladrin. So this is a nice thing, like I was talking about in the introduction, where prior editions of the game you would just be told, no, you can't do that. Here, that nobody's saying you can't do any of these. You could do whatever you want with these. You just have some restrictions and limitations, and you have to get creative with how you assign your ability scores in order to make that work. So that's really what we're looking at here. And running through all of them, the Eladrin is probably the weakest one. So just to kind of sort them, I would say, if we were to take them, let's see if I can I'll make a list over here. So a Dragonborn is probably, if you're wanting to do a strength-based melee attack type cleric, the Dragonborn is going to be your choice. If you're looking more for something that is using your holy symbol and making ranged attacks, then you're looking at a dwarf or an elf. So I really kind of put these all in the same, because the one is not better than the other. It's more about what type of cleric you're trying to make. The Dragonborn for your melee attacking cleric versus the dwarf or the elf if you're going to do that holy symbol, more range-based attacks. Your next choices that you have are the dwarf. Excuse me, we did the dwarf. The half-elf would be, now we're looking at our tier 2. And this is a pretty big jump for me to get down to this level, because now you're at your half-elf, halfling, and tiefling. And these are, I just realized that I'm not, I didn't put these where I wanted them. I just needed to make some more room to work with, and we'll put those over there. So that is our first tier, is our Dragonborn, dwarf, elf is our tier 1s. And then our next tier is going to be our half-elf, halfling, and tieflings. So because these are really keyed off that charisma, and you don't really get much use out of that charisma unless you can actually hit, which requires you to use your wisdom, having a character that really benefits from the charisma is only going to be of minimal value. You can make it work, and then you would get that bonus from the charisma. So that is what ultimately puts those three above the Eladrin, which the Eladrin doesn't give you any special bonuses that affect a cleric because it's just dexterity, intelligence. You don't get wisdom, you don't get strength, you don't get charisma. There's nothing there to work with. You would have to have a really kind of balanced character. If that's what you're after, that's what you would do there. But that's kind of our tier rankings for a cleric. If you're trying to build a cleric, that's kind of the order that I would go with them. Choose Dragonborn, Dwarf, Elf would be your priority, and then the other options as needed if that fits what you're trying to do. So that is our first run through this. Had a little bit of glitch there with the technology trying to get it displayed. I will tighten that up for the future. So, but definitely let me know in the comments if there's some other things I should take into consideration when we're talking about our races and our classes and what would work best, and trying to do this analysis. If I overlooked something here, definitely like to hear that down in the comments as well. So hopefully you found that helpful if you're building out a cleric, so you can make it as optimal for you as possible. I will go through the rest of the classes in future videos in this series. I may or may not go in order. I tend to try to, I might be interested in one versus another, and I may approach them out of sequence. So, but I don't know what the next one actually is going to be. I might actually, maybe I'll ask on the Discord server for anyone that's over there what they want the next one to be. So keep a lookout for that if you are a member of the Discord server. But hopefully they found that helpful and informative, if not entertaining. So until next time, take care.